Hey Joe, take a look at the internet weather for this week. Not anything too dramatically changed from what we've seen in previous weeks, but I thought I'd point out the ones that are maybe more interesting.
Okay.
So in terms of the most probe ports, this is where most of the scanning, irrespective of how many people are doing it. And port 80, web, we see in here a lot. The 23 and 22 is Telnet and SSH. Of course, those are a lot of the IoT devices trying to find each other. We're going to take a closer look at 8545 TCP again. This is the Ethereum Wallet. There's a bunch of these exposed on the internet, and we talked about this in the past. Microsoft SQL servers come up a little bit. We continue to see a lot of scanning on that. 445 TCP is your Microsoft server message block, which is file sharing, and that's a WannaCry and some of these other ones we see spreading via that. Remote desktop protocol we see all the time, FTP. And then NTP really popped up from many positions down. It's probably some people looking for NTP reflectors to use as part of reflection attacks.
But there's no new vulnerability there that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think it's probably more people collecting lists of NTP open reflectors that they can use. So in the most sources probing, which is where you see lots of devices all scanning for specific ports in concert with each other, which usually indicates some sort of infection or botnet of some sort involved there. We have 445 TCP again. The other ones we've talked about already, but 8080 TCP we're going to take a closer look at as well. And BitTorrent is probably not security related, although there's a potential for that to be used as a reflection. So people could use those as like a UDP type reflector in reflective attacks. And 5555 TCP is the Android debugger port. We'll take a closer look at that one as well.
Overall, not a lot of variation, huh?
No, it's pretty much the ones we've been seeing for a while now.
So we haven't seen any new ports being probed. We haven't seen anything really drop off. We're not seeing any, fewer IoT devices being scanned, which, in itself is fairly interesting. We're sort of establishing a profile of normal within the network.
So 8545 TCP, this is that Ethereum wallet. We've had a lot of activity on this for probably, I would say, 6 months to a year now. And it's still remained pretty relatively high compared. This is a 90-day chart here. And so we're looking at like 260,000 scanned flows, not number of sources, but that's pretty high. And it is a smaller number of sources involved in this activity. So it's a small number of actors, but they're generating a lot of noise. And then there was an article very recently, a couple of weeks ago, that there was somebody who has been exploiting vulnerable wallets here and has acquired potentially around 20 million US dollars in stolen cryptocurrency for Ethereum. So that's, could explain a lot of this rise or be, part of why we're seeing so much of this activity lately around here. The next one is port 8080 TCP, and we've talked about this for a couple of weeks now at least. Back in the early May timeframe, there was a vulnerability for this GPON router that was announced, and ever since that was announced, somewhere around the 7th or 8th here, we started to see really large increase in scanning. And again, 360 NetLab put a really good article out about this, where they had kind of backtracked which families of malware are being distributed over this GPON vulnerability. So they mentioned Metal, Moostic, Mirai, Hajime, and Satori. And I did go into our Honeypot for this one today because I was wondering, what does this actually look like? Are we seeing more of it? This one, again, same exploits at the top here, what we captured in our Honeypot. And I kind of highlighted where you see that they're passing in on the dest host field an actual command. And this is going to get executed by the GPON router, because it's got this vulnerability where it arbitrarily executes things that are stuffed in here.
Yeah.
And it says to go wget this file and then write it out.
VPN filter.
Yes, it actually names the file vpnfilter.mips, and then it executes it. I actually fetched that, ran it through VirusTotal, and it does come up as Mirai for the most part. Most of the vendors are detecting it as Mirai. There's a lot of variants of Mirai.
Yeah, well, we talked about VPN filter a couple of weeks ago on the show, and yeah, that was what we said. It was a variant of Mirai. It's interesting. You catch it right in the string there.
Right, right. So I don't know I don't know how tightly coupled all that is, or if that's a ruse that they need a VPN filter, if it really is, and whatnot. Right. But this is like a live sample of how it. Again, when I grabbed this, I did it safely. I don't recommend you do this in your browser. That would be a problem. And then port 5555 TCP. This is the Android debug bridge. We've talked about this one before. This has remained high. This is a 180-day chart. So back in early February, we went from basically nobody scanning this port to around 7,000 people scanning it. It went down, and it's kind of gone up and kind of stayed aggressively high. Yeah. It kind of had like a little brief period of a lull there for a while, but it's gone quite a bit back up to around the same levels that it was before, and has stayed there. There is a family of malware called ADB Miner that's kind of acting like a worm. It installs on the device, then it starts to go try to find more devices like it. Again, 360 Lab has a good story on this as well, where they analyzed it and the number of devices. We talked about this Android debug bridge before. Basically, it's a port that allows like a developer to debug their code. If it's left on or it's shipped from the vendor on, that would leave it exposed potentially to the internet. And that's why there's some number of these devices out there that are easily compromisable because of that. And when you have access to the debugger facility, you can really basically execute anything on the device you want because you're operating at a very low level at that point. So that's what's going on here. And this ADB Miner program mines for that and then also spreads as part of its behavior to look for more devices to infect. That's why we see a lot of coordinated scanning there. Cool. And I think that's it for this week, yeah.
All right. Thanks, John. Interesting stuff.